Sackbot Barbecue.
And I'm Giggleklutz. And today we're going to discuss Killmonday games, Fran, and Little Misfortune.
It's our first double feature.
True. And this is a very special episode. I want to set the stage right now by first giving a trigger warning for those games. Probably not so much the episode. I don't think the episode itself is going to be super triggering, even though it may gently touch on triggering type or, serious trauma topics. We're not going to get into deep, gory details. So the games themselves have gore, for sure. All kinds of traumatic situations between talking about child abuse, child sex abuse, murder, lots of kinds of violence, quite honestly. Neglect.
Did we mention drugs already?
What?
Did we already mention drugs?
No, we've not mentioned drugs. But yeah, drugs. I'm not sure about smoking, but lots of children using drugs.
The games are not shying away from heavy things that happen to people.
Suicide,
yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty big one.
They're child protagonists, but the games are not for children. As cutesy of aesthetics as the games try and have, they are creepy cute, but these are heavy stories dealing with trauma and neglect, and the games themselves are not for children. And then, so, spoiler warning for this episode is that we are going to dive right into some of the real things that happen in these games, and we are going to talk about their endings. So if you have any interest in playing these games and not spoiling yourself, of course, the episode can wait. But we want to also take this opportunity to welcome people, hopefully professionals, because I am recommending this episode to my professional friends, and I'm asking my friends to recommend this episode to their therapists and other people they know in the mental health field, because we want to talk about and really explore what these games are a good example of, which is talking about how trauma affects people and letting people tell their stories of trauma using video games as a medium. And I think these two games do this fantastically in a lot of different ways that I want to talk about. But because of that, because of this invitation to people who are not normally gamers, we're going to talk about, hopefully, succeed at talking about these things in a more just general way and not in a deep gaming way. So we're not going to talk much about gaming mechanics or about developers or that kind of thing so much.
Here's what I can say on the topic. The games are good, the games are fun. We enjoyed playing them.
True. Very true. And as for gamers who do want to experience these games, my recommendation, I think the family agrees with me, is that you get more immersive experience playing Fran than just watching Fran. And Little Misfortune could go either way. So if you really feel you'll be more immersed by playing the game yourself, play it yourself. Otherwise, I think you can get most of what you'd want to get out of this game by watching somebody stream it. I recommend Jacksepticeye's streaming video about it. I'll link that in the blog. Yeah, because I got almost more out of watching him play the game than I got out of the game itself, because his compassion for the character Little Misfortune was... I'm tearing up a little bit, honestly. It was healing for my inner child and recognizing some of the things that I've been through, and just hearing somebody witness a child going through, showing evidence of trauma. She doesn't go through that much trauma in the game itself, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But just hearing a compassionate voice respond to trauma exhibited through a child was very healing for me. I appreciate him and the makers of these games for that kind of stuff. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about Killmonday Games as a company. They're bigger than what they were, but they're out of Sweden, and they were started by a married couple, Natalia and Isak Martinsson, and they released Fran in 2015 and Little Misfortune in 2019, and I think they just expanded where they're available. At least Fran, they updated it recently so it could be available on more places. But I know both of them are available on Steam, and I think they're available on other platforms, but you'll have to do your own research on that. I haven't completely checked that. And so, Sackbot, do you want to give us a little lowdown on Fran?
So, Fran was about a girl named Fran who, once lived a good and enjoyable life in the past. She had parents, her beloved cat, Mr. Midnight, and things were fine. Then one day, her parents were dismembered. She finds them in bloody pieces, and, she she has a understandable reaction of running away. She gets lost in the woods and separated from her cat. Gets found and put in a mental hospital.
That's where we join her.
First chapter will see you exploring and escaping this facility. One of the key things you will be using throughout large portions of this game is pills that change the way Fran, and by extension you, the player, see the world. And it's... the things you see when you take those pills is not pleasant. It's like you go from being in this scary institution to seeing it full of blood. It's a lot of, a lot of things you see depicted as, shadowy figures, rotten corpses, skeletons.
Maggots.
You see it full of just these horrific things. Being a mental facility, it's like you are not alone here. There are other, traumatized children you'll meet. And it's like, when you take your medicine to see this stuff, you can see the things that torment them personified. And, when you talk to them, they can see this stuff too. I absolutely understand when you talk to them about it.
And it is unclear whether or not they're on the same medicine, but it's not unreasonable to suspect that they are.
There's a very real possibility, unless they're going through something similar.
So the longer-term story follows the adventures of Fran getting out of the hospital, finding her cat, and lots of other extended things, right? I want to interject here, and you can keep this or delete it, I don't care, how hard it is to describe this kind of a story to people who are used to, TV narratives. Video game narratives are different. They don't, especially this one, puzzle game ones, they don't quite work the same.
Yeah, because, you can kind of think about this journey being in, different phases. There's the mental hospital, and then you're in the woods, and then you're in the well. It just keeps progressing into different scenes that don't necessarily feel like they connect to the one before it. That can just be how video games work, and it kind of lends itself to the fact that Fran is not really experiencing reality like the rest of us, kind of.
Which is a major theme of the game.
Indeed.
And so rather than continue with the synopsis, because the synopsis is less important, really, than what the game is trying to do and what it actually says. It's because they give you a chance. Well, gosh, there's a lot of lore that goes on here, and for lore people, it can be fun to know that both these two games exist in their own universe. They definitely have the same things going on in the lore settings of space and time kind of things, and you don't have to care about that when you play, but if that's something that you're into, that's provided for you. But since this was supposed to be an episode more for people who don't game, but that is, it's deeper stuff is available for people who like deeper stories. That is provided in here, and you can delve into it. Just make sure you read everything when you're in the game.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily intrude because our protagonists are young children. While they might be curious about it, they aren't necessarily going to care about the history of the places they're going through.
Or the existences of other dimensions of reality. Is just something that they experience, not something that they're curious enough about to really try and put it into some sort of context. But as a player, and hopefully adult, we can, if that is something that's interesting to us. But what it uses Fran Bow, her story, and the way that the medicine changes both of our experience of Fran's reality, and what all of that does is really shine a light on how trauma can change the reality of the person who survived it. After they've survived something that not everybody else goes through, that's not normal for people to go through, their view on the world changes. Their perspective is different, and it's going to cause communication problems. The ways they've shifted are going to be invisible to other people. And it doesn't even translate just knowing the story. People who know Fran Bow's story in her life still really don't understand how her perception of reality has changed. Her doctors really don't seem to... Well, no, they don't have a chance yet Later on that changes. The narrative gives her main doctor a chance to grow. But in the beginning, he absolutely doesn't want to put any stock into the weirdness that she talks about. They don't want to feed her delusions, right? Meanwhile, they are very real and they are affecting her. To her, they're absolutely not delusions. She finds holes in the floor and in the wall that aren't there for other people that she can use now with her distorted reality.
It's like you cannot get through this game without indulging those delusions.
Yep.
In that way, the way that you can accomplish things, get places you couldn't otherwise, it's like, it makes them real to you, the player, in a tangible way.
Which gives you a chance to play with the idea, how would it feel to be in that distorted reality? How do you react? And it also has an ongoing theme through both of these games and through, I find, trauma-informed care in general, and I wrote it down on a piece of paper so we'd remember it the whole time, is that this theme in these games really emphasize that going through bad things doesn't make you a villain. Because, like, Fran Bow especially would be classified as a horror game. It fits in the horror genre just because of the gore and the heavy subject matter and all of that. But Fran is not the villain. The game has a villain, yes, but Fran is not the villain. Fran is a survivor of trauma. And like a lot of traumatized people, the evidence in the world doesn't match her memory of what happened. And she has kind of several versions of that memory in a way of what happened. And it's left to the player to kind of decide how you feel about that. The evidence doesn't match her reality. It doesn't match the stories that the doctors have, don't match the records that they kept. Fran's memories don't necessarily match her own story sometimes.
Yeah, like, I think I remember a part where she's saying that, like, I want to go back home so I can be with my parents. Even though she knows her parents are dead, she still thinks that, like, it'll still be good enough in a way. Or maybe I'm wrong. People keep telling me I'm wrong, so maybe this is wrong.
Which is another thing that can happen. Once you tell traumatized people that what they're experiencing isn't real, it can be very hard for them to now find what is real and decide who to trust. Because the trauma changes their perception, so they end up skewed to everybody else, and if nobody's trying to really calibrate them back in and find some common ground that is still real for both parties in their shared reality, they're always miscommunicating. And that miscommunication causes more and more problems, and often leaves the traumatized person more vulnerable than they started, which is absolutely the case for Fran. Fran ends up running away and being in the woods again and alone, when after what she's been through, she should have been supported. If she was in the hospital, she should have been supported, right?
Yeah. So, draw two parallel lines, but one is at a slight angle. If you never correct them, they're just gonna keep getting farther and farther apart.
I mean, technically they aren't parallel, but...
Well, they may seem parallel at first, but that will change if you let them keep going. Don't check in on them.
Yeah. But it's very true, while the situation is fantastical and it's fiction, how trauma affects people is absolutely represented in both of these games. We'll get to how it is in Little Misfortune in a little bit. But, so you go through the story playing Fran Bow, and she does escape the mental hospital. She does find her cat, but when she finds her cat, the cat talks to her. We hear what the cat has to say. Now, this game is not voice acted. I remember it being voice acted in my brain because we voice act our stuff for ourselves while we play. So our shared experience is, everything on the screen is read out loud. But that won't be your experience unless you do it for yourself, because that's not how the game was produced.
Voice acting is expensive.
But yeah, Mr. Midnight, when you find him, does have lines of written dialogue. Many of them.
Mm-hmm. And the personality and definite ways that he feels about things.
Oh, I missed you, Fran.
Yeah, Mr. Midnight is very much a, traveling companion character when you find him.
Mm-hmm. So Fran goes through trials and tribulations, and then she experiences sort of a death and goes to sort of a heaven, and then has to find her way through heaven to get herself back to Earth. And then the story doesn't end there. Then she has to try and find her family again and get home once she gets more back to our reality. And the game doesn't ever decide for you how real any of that is.
It's like, they end up dropping hints that both suggest that what Fran is experiencing is very real, and also some where it isn't. So it's in this, conflicting state where if you study all of the evidence, it becomes paradoxical.
Right. But they also resolve that within the structure of the game by explaining it as different layers of reality. So Fran, via trauma, can experience reality both on the physical plane where we live our normal everyday lives, and kind of a more psychic realm at the same time. Now, I'm not saying that that's a way that we should be talking about reality when we're talking about trauma survivors, but if we think about it like it is a different realm that we can't necessarily experience but is very real to them, it makes it a little bit more accessible and gives us a more neutral way to talk about it. And
it's like the trauma glasses. There's a filter over it.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you work hard enough, you can lift the glasses up for a little while, but most of the time you're just wearing the glasses.
And you can pretend that you're not, and you can mask what you see and only talk about what we think is in the shared reality, which is often what's expected of trauma survivors, is that you're not supposed to trauma dump on people. When people ask you straight up questions, you're supposed to give more normal answers. Well, how are you today? Well, actually, you mask and you say, oh, I'm a little stressed today. So, you might notice stress in me, but I'm fine. I'm handling it okay. There you go. When really, if they were giving the honest answer to them, it'd be like, it's a traumaversary for me today. I may be experiencing tons of emotional or more traditional flashbacks as I go through my day. And I've learned how to handle life while they're happening to me, but it's like a TV show I don't want on in my brain at the same time I'm trying to experience reality. And I just have to pretend that it's static and not pay it any attention and try really hard to focus on the here and now, because that's what's expected of me. But that here and now is only a part of my current experience. It's only a part of what I'm going through right now. And the rest of it's invisible. All of the effort it takes me to fight the other things going on leave me with less resources to handle the here and now. And if people on the outside have no empathy for that struggle, it's going to look like laziness. It's going to look like sometimes passive aggressiveness, sometimes all kinds of things. It's going to look like somebody being on the defensive when they really might be on the defensive. They might have to be very, very protective of the energy that they have, because it takes all the energy that they've got almost just to stay focused and present in the here and now so they can participate in the shared reality, because no one is giving them any grace about their hidden reality, about their trauma reality, that they don't want to dump on other people, that they don't want to get their mess on their relationships and on other people. But it's hard, and it takes an effort that is often thankless.
You lost me.
Really?
Yeah. There was a lot in there.
You might be seeing a room full of rotten corpses, but because everybody else you're with can't see them, you're expected to just deal with that and be fine.
Yeah. So let's circle back to what is reality, because for Fran Bow, that's a huge question. And they play with this idea quite a bit. And I think that, this whole story doesn't take place in the mental hospital, just the first chapter does. But when we use that first chapter to kind of set the stage, the professionals are usually the ones who get to set reality. They're the ones who decide definitively where the shared reality should be. What's defined by the physical realm, and the rest of it is skew, right?
Yeah, there's, when we're talking about, how you could describe the things, Fran seeing as just delusions. It's like, yeah, that's, saying that it's not real, defining what reality is supposed to be.
And I think it's a testament to Fran Bow as a game, and as a piece of art, in my opinion, that all these different pieces are allowed to exist concurrently. That's the word I'm looking for, concurrently, because they don't all line up. The evidence doesn't line up. Even Fran's version of the story don't all line up. There's space for lots of different versions of reality, and I'm holding up finger quotes, It gives reality a chance to be bigger than just any one thing.
Reality is your perspective.
Yeah. And if you're not allowed to talk about the different lenses you have, like you were talking about with the trauma glasses, if you're not allowed to acknowledge your trauma glasses, then people will just be dismissive of who you are or what you have to say, and often try and act like you have nothing to provide, or act like you're a liar. Do you feel like Fran's a liar in any of this?
No.
If I'm not being shown the truth here, just calling it a lie isn't good enough.
I mean, I guess I can think of times when she does lie, but that's not her lying about reality. That's her lying to, save her skin or...
Right. It's lying to accomplish an objective, which is a thing that kids are going to do, is a thing that people are going to do. And yeah, nobody's a perfect person in any of the Killmonday games universe. Or they call it free, I guess. The 5 realities of... I don't know. Anyway, lore stuff. That doesn't have to matter. Meanwhile, it's there if you're into that kind of stuff, which I am, and I kind of want to delve back into it at some point, just to really think about those parts, because it's like fun existential stuff. But
considering we have 2 games to talk about today, maybe not the best time.
No, absolutely not the best time. That's a teaser to get people into the fun parts of it, because it kind of sounds like this might be a downer.
But yeah, I'll just, add my own cap to this and say, I think the lore is legitimately interesting. Just some neat stuff with it.
And I do think it has implications into how we think about trauma and tools that are possible to develop around how we handle, one, being traumatized ourselves and handling what other traumatized people go through. There's stuff that's you could play with in there, but I don't want to get into that in detail because it's just too complicated for the scope and scale of this episode. I just want to talk about that video games do even deeper things than we're going to be able to talk about today. And so is that pretty much wrap up the general Frambo stuff?
I think we've got a suitable amount of Frambo sort of depth into the episode at this point.
Okay.
I'm comfortable moving on.
All right.
It's like I'm not going to imply we've covered all of it.
Oh gosh,
no.
Even if we gave each game their own episode, it wouldn't cover all of it. It just wouldn't. So, Honeyshuckle, you ready to talk about Little Misfortune? Because I
am.
It's a different flavor. It's a very different
flavor.
It's a whole nother can of worms.
With less gore.
Surprisingly.
More vomit, less gore. And if vomit's
That's
a trigger for you...
That's the tagline. There we go.
More vomit, less gore.
Yeah. It's a perfect tagline. You could just see her saying that on the box.
Fancy!
Little Misfortune is a young girl who lives with her family on the outskirts of a town. Her father is currently away and her mother is downstairs making food in quotation marks.
And drinking juice in quotation marks.
Juice in quotation marks. She sits in her bedroom being narrated by some voice who addresses you specifically. There are 3 primary players in this game. Little Misfortune, the narrator, and you. And the narrator is quick to say that Little Misfortune is going to die today. What a heavy entrance. We are like a minute into this game.
Yeah, just pulling another one of those, oh yeah, by the way, her parents got dismembered one day kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely different, but
But the game is very quick to assure you, like I said, that you are not Little Misfortune in this game. You are a guiding force to Little Misfortune. And as such, the gameplay is pretty different. You're not necessarily solving puzzles, you're just helping Little Misfortune make decisions. Like, what do you think would be best for her? What do you think would be best for her life, her little adventure that this voice is taking her on? Kind of a dubious intent, if I wanted to put it lightly.
Definitely ominous from the get-go.
I mean, I don't know. It's not like this narrator comes and says, like, oh yeah, she's gonna die today or anything like that.
So let's get her out of the house. What could possibly go wrong? Like, already, I love that this game has just, like, such a radically different tone from Frambo, But we do immediately still get introduced to the fact that Little Misfortune is traumatized. The first decision you make in this game is which of Little Misfortune's toys does she take with her. Either a unicorn or a rock. And if you pick the rock, she is very cheerfully vocal to say, like, oh yes, this is the rock that Daddy hit me with one time.
I named him Rocky.
And they deliberately still portray that rock with blood on it.
Yep.
She drew a face on the rock and now uses it as a toy.
Like, Little Misfortune is not okay. Little Misfortune is just as traumatized, but in a completely different direction.
Not in a good place. Not really.
No. It gives us more perspective, if you look at this in comparison to the previous game, that there's more than one flavor of trauma.
Yes. One thing I like about both games is both main characters do what traumatized survivors do. And they talk about their trauma plain. They don't, these things that, they make you cry when it first happens, but as you heal and it's your reality, they can talk about it like it's an everyday thing. Because living with the fact that it happened is an everyday thing for them. And in Fran Bow, it's more in the PTSD style, where it's something that happened very traumatically all of a sudden.
And she does still cry over occasionally when it gets...
Well, sure. And in Little Misfortune, though, it's more about neglect. And this has just always been her normal. And the game does a really good job of really showing you how these traumatized children talk. It's actually voice acted by Natalia herself, who wrote the game. And, and she has this cute little voice.
Okay, Mr. Voice.
And she carries a thing of glitter around with her.
Yes, the glitter, where if she ever encounters something that's kind of a downer, she can just throw glitter, and she'll imagine it better. And in a way, it kind of echoes, like, Fran taking medicine, but we only get to see glimpses of it for Misfortune as you throw the glitter.
And like you had mentioned, both games kind of talk about hope and what hope looks like for traumatized people. And in Fran Beau's case, it's a pessimistic view of life and, bad things happen and they just keep happening.
And a Little Misfortune, she can't really stand to think of stuff as bad, because if she starts to think about stuff as bad and bad stuff that has happened to her as bad, then she's going to have a breakdown. So she has to have hope about these. She has to see them in the best possible light.
Even as the stories that she tells get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, because this Mr. Voice, the narrator, it's pretty clear that this is, some malevolent entity, possibly demonic in nature, and he is very off-put by these stories that Little Misfortune is telling.
Well, yeah, it's just, even the demon that's trying to lead the child astray is appalled at what she's already been through. And I love that in the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just what now?
It's something I personally have said about this game is it's kind of terrifying how unscary this game ends up being most of the time.
Some of it is kind of played as a joke, but as this sort of horrifying, this happened to me joke. And it's oh, I feel so terrible. The way you're telling this is so funny, but it's so fucked up.
Right. And which is how it plays out. When kids tell you their stories in a matter-of-fact way, using horrifying details, it doesn't mean that they're lying or that they're pumping up a story to get attention. It means that their normal might be very, very different than what you suspected that it was. Not always, but if it's consistent for that child, I think this game is a very, very good representation of how traumatized children talk, about the weird trauma dumps that they do, about their misunderstanding about what discreet conversation sounds like, about their weird casual exposure to things like sex and drug use, which are all represented in here.
Yeah, the the fact that she talks about how her mom will flash people so that she can get free stuff. It's something that Misfortune should not have to see without further context.
Right. Or about how mommy would hug people by the dumpster. That kind of thing. And Little Misfortune, and that is her name. Her name is Misfortune Rodriguez. If you needed an in to kind of how this is set up. This pulls no punches, quite honestly. I mean, Little Misfortune tells you a story about how mommy told her a few times that she wishes she had aborted her. But she still loves her mommy. And she still wants her mommy to be happy. In fact, that's how the demon narrator voice lures her out of the house.
It's like, we can get you whatever you want. And she's like, I want happiness for mommy.
Happiness for mommy. And it just makes me tear up just thinking about it. This poor little tortured soul, all she wants is happiness for her mommy. And that's common. A lot of times, support for neglected children feels like threat to their parents. And really all they want is for their parents to be happy. Because they already know how to make their own happiness. Little Misfortune has no problem making herself happy no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what.
No matter what. Ha-ha.
Yeah, even if she finds a puppy and it dies tragically right in front of her. Even
if she walks into somebody else's house.
And finds they've hung themselves.
I'm just gonna glitter you a stool to stand on. We're all happy here.
Well, and she talks about him, she calls him a piñata and offers to hit him with a stick.
And the narrator's like, oh, no, he's a dead guy. He's not, don't hit him. He's not a piñata. Candy's not gonna fall out.
No. In fact, we need to get out of here right away. Yes, when the malicious narrator character has to change gears to care for his victim over and over again.
Yeah, he gets frustrated as the game goes on. Not because she's not doing what he wants, because she will do it. She's just like, okay. It's that, like, she's just consistently getting herself into these situations that are, like, who does this?
Right.
Yeah, it's like, I remember, like there was even an instance where you do hear the narrator just kind of being like, did I bite off more than I could chew with this one? Was this a mistake?
When she's, eating things off the ground, and she's okay with doing anything that's asked of her, no matter how outrageous or awful or whatever, and she often will couple that with a story that's just worse. And you don't expect it out of a child, and even the entity trying to lead her astray kind of finds he can, but also isn't the one that's leading her astray. She was already over there.
If anything, he has to reel her back in. Repeatedly.
Which he's unprepared for, which is amazingly powerful narrative. These games are powerful. I'm gonna say that flat out. I mean, they're challenging, but they're powerful.
Like, it also just... It goes to show just, like, how trauma can leave you in just such a vulnerable place.
Neglect especially.
Like, it took, like, zero effort to get her outside of her house.
To cross the street, even though she wasn't allowed.
Isn't it like when you get that opening narration of, like, he's talking about, oh yeah, she's gonna die today. And did you say, it's like, I know I can hear you.
Yeah. And she just kind of brushes it off like, okay, Mr. Voice.
So a voice in my head said, I'm gonna die today. Okay. It's like she's not scared of anything almost. If she does get scared later, when, in the end, when the demon's trying to show himself and scare her on purpose, he's like shaking everything apart. And there is the side plot of there's a fox.
Benjamin!
Who she knows his name is Benjamin. We don't know how. But as far as we know, most of the game, she named him Benjamin. And he's an anthropomorphic fox. He walks on two legs, but he's very visibly a fox. And she's in love with him. And she's like 8. And her eyes turn into hearts when she talks about him. And she writes about him in her journal.
Mr. Voice does not like Benjamin.
No, not at all. And it turns out that she's right to trust Benjamin. He ends up rescuing her in the end, whatever that means.
It's like he is, in fact, a interdimensional agent whose mission is to kind of deal with cases like these.
And thwart the demon guys. And he succeeds, eventually, but he really did need Little Misfortune's help to do it. And it just, I don't know, it's hard to describe the narrative. It's a weird story. It's a very weird story. And it does touch on, but not really tap into so much the lore that's more exposed in Fran Bow. But they're the same universe. The lore still applies. Just Little Misfortune's a lot more grounded in our reality than Fran Bow was.
Yeah, and it's also set closer to modern day as well, which can hit home a lot more.
That's true. We didn't talk about this earlier, but Fran Bow is set in the 1940s, and Little Misfortune, I think, is set in the 80s, so it's a lot closer to now. But still, like, no cell phones, and, you know, like, there's payphone that plays a part in some of that, but yeah.
Like, I remember a scene with a giant boombox.
Yeah.
As well, which is a very 80s.
Yeah, late 80s thing. I'm trying to think about... I'm looking at our list of notes to see what we still wanted to make sure we cover. Oh, the ways that she talks. We've got a quote here that says, "Give yourself a fuck!" Like, she's exposed to lots of swear words, but nobody converses with her using them, I'm guessing. So she doesn't quite know how to use them, she just knows them.
Yeah, when people would say, "Go fuck yourself," she says, "Give yourself a fuck."
Right, thinking that that's the same thing, and it's not really.
It's the same thing in that the words could technically be construed into the same general meaning, but not in, like, usual slang.
Right, and she means to tell you off when she says that. That's true. Which is kind of a good counterpoint, because we had a point about language in Fran Bow, too, where language of traumatized people, the way they talk, especially as children, doesn't necessarily represent reality. Like, the example in Fran Bow we have is there in the hospital, there's a boy who asks her to kill him. And you have the choice of whether or not you say you will or that you won't. And if you choose you will, she finger guns him. Bang!
Bang, 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 bang!
And he's grateful. That's what he was looking for. He was looking for some metaphorical way to die.
Or like an excuse to space out, an excuse to dissociate.
Sure.
Wanted permission to just be dead for a while.
And she obliged him. She didn't question his wanting to die. She didn't make a big deal out of it. And just trauma is going to make you talk in ways that are triggering for other people, but it's just normal for you. And I liked that they explored that both with Little Misfortune coming across an actual body and it not giving her PTSD, and Fran Bow participating in someone asking her to kill them, and they both found it a pleasurable interaction. And it's just counterpoint to people who don't spend their daily lives steeped in trauma responses and trauma language. That's triggering for people from the outside, where it doesn't have to be for the person on the inside, which is so, it seems so wrong.
But I mean, like, this is a safe place. Like, these two traumatized people talking to each other is a safe place among peers. Unlike talking to these medical professionals, they have a detachment from this. They're not on the same level.
Right.
So it's not as safe.
Which gets in the way of having open expression and getting down to the meat of a mutual understanding, and that's the trick we fall into when we're trying to be supportive of traumatized people sometimes, is we want to take them seriously, but then that ends up with us taking them literally, which isn't necessarily the best course of action. It's not even the most validating one sometimes. And it's hard to know. It's a case-by-case basis, because everyone's trauma changes their brain differently, changes their experience differently, because it's not just that, when X happens to people, then their brain responds in Y way. No, their brain and body are going to respond in a way that's appropriate for that brain and body trying to live the life that they have with the history that they also have, both genetic, cultural, and story memory. The storyline of their life has all of this whatever built up to this point, then that happened, and this is the reaction you get. There's no way to predict what that's going to be, even for the person it's happening to. it's complicated. And just all the tiny little details in both Fran Bow and Little Misfortune really give examples of how this dealing with trauma narrative plays out.
So yeah, it's like, these two games can, take on like different sort of facets and aspects of this important issue while never being, it's like these can teach you a lot without being edutainment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is really, really far from edutainment.
I don't know. It's like you're gonna try and make games that teach people things. I think this is kind of more the thing you probably actually want to go for. Not necessarily make it as disturbing. The issue does not require it, obviously, but,
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Because I wanted to make this episode so that way we could really talk about the power that video games have to shine light on experiences that we hope not everybody has, that we hope people don't end up neglected, and that you don't end up traumatized by terrible things happening. Yet, these are things that are going to happen to people in the world. There may be people that you know, and there's a lot of true to the spiritness happening. Even though it's a fiction, there's a lot of true to the spirit of the subject stuff going on in these. And I think it's powerful and hopeful. Both these stories are about traumatized kids who don't give up, no matter what. And they don't lose themselves into badness, or they don't become the villain of their stories, no matter how bad things get, no matter how hopeless things get. And we need more stories like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think having more exposure to media that does this kind of thing gives us more neutral examples so that we can support each other and our friends we haven't even met yet, and more meet them where they are, even though there's going to be reality gaps between us. I love these two particular narratives for the ways that they grapple with the reality gaps that we all face as we discover how much every individual we've ever met has been through. And I wanted to use the podcast in general to better focus on the amazing work that video games can do to let you experience someone else's narrative. Yeah, movies do it, but there's an immersion difference between what a book or a movie can do.
Like, I mean, in Little Misfortune, you canonically are a character.
The narrator will address you as the person on the other side of the screen.
You are part of the narrative. There is no fourth wall, and that sort of thing can't really happen with a movie, because a movie doesn't have you have agency. It's, as soon as you have any bit of agency, it's typically a game.
Right. And what I love about the way they did that is they want you to think about how you respond to witnessing evidence of trauma in another human versus the first person narrative by asking you to play the characters. Like, how do you think you would respond when you're put into this traumatized reality? You empathize by trying to live it in Fran Bow. You empathize by witnessing it in Little Misfortune. And it's a very different thing. And I've never seen anybody do that before. It's something that Little Misfortune's doing that I've never seen done anywhere else.
And I think, like, Little Misfortune in particular, she's at this particular age where it's very important to be able to identify these signs, because this is when, like, she's starting to talk to outside people about what she's going through, and you need to be able to listen before it's too late.
Right, and in her case it was. She does get led outside.
And she dies.
She does die.
That was not a lie.
No, not at all. And because she did all the work to connect with Benjamin, Benjamin gives her a better afterlife than she would have had otherwise. But her story, you can't save Little Misfortune. And that's not the point of the game. You might think it is while you play, but you can't save her life.
You might want to help her, but she's gone before you realize it.
And that happens a lot when you're helping traumatized people, is that you might be trying to save the wrong part. You might be trying to do the wrong thing to save somebody.
And that's the thing, is you can't look at it like you're going to save anyone, because that's not up to us. I mean, professionals listening, yes, that's more your job. But just in general, when we have our friends who we discover are traumatized, and new people that we meet that we discover have been through what we consider horrors. It's like we can't save them, but what we can do is listen with more broad understanding of how reality is bigger than just what we've experienced, and really let them feel seen in a way that feels good to them, that connects with them rather than how we imagine that we would want to feel seen should we project ourselves into their shoes. It helps us fine-tune our listening by witnessing other people's experiences, and video games provide a safe environment to do that play. Nothing you do in a video game is going to have real-world consequences that you don't take with you in your own emotional body, right? It's like you might change via the experience, but you're not going to hurt other people by playing a video game at home any more than you would by reading a book at home. Mm-hmm. But as is true to the nature of our podcast, we don't think you should do these things in isolation. I hope you play games that do deep and hard things, and then you talk about them either with other game enthusiasts or your friends, and that you mention this kind of stuff to your therapist if you're moved. If you feel seen by something for the first time, mention it to the people who want to understand you better. Let media help you bridge some of the gaps that go into the unspoken places.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Because I think that's a lovely note.
I do too. I mean,
we could have you talking for another 3 hours, but
I feel called out, but it's probably true.
I said with the when we were switching from Fran to Little Misfortune, it's like, yeah, we could have episodes on par with the stuff we do with Outer Wilds if we really wanted to dig into all this.
Yeah, and I still feel like even what we did with Outer Wilds is scratching the surface, but nobody got time for that.
Look, if you want a sequel to this one day, just leave it in the comments. We love to read them, and...
Oh, absolutely. If I have the energy, I may write a little bit about Itward in Frambo and friendship with traumatized people, but I may not. Itward is a character in Frambo who really... I don't know, it's a pivotal character.
Yeah, he's definitely important, but, we kind of ran out of time today.
Right. We ran out of time and steam and space where it fit. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about around Itward, really. But anyway, this, hopefully, if you've never really played video games before, this wet your whistle to what's possible, and I encourage you to go to our blog and click on a few links. I'm going to have a few things there that you can go to YouTube and watch, or maybe articles to read. And I haven't decided what's all in there yet.
We're also going to have memes. We always have memes. We like making memes.
To be fair, they make all the memes. I just provide the place for them to post. So far. I haven't gotten into the meme making yet. I want to give all the kudos where the kudos are due. The kids make the memes. If you like the memes, it's the kids. I'm like, applause for my children, my talented children who make podcasts and memes and do all this amazing stuff. But we also I want to send a shout out to Killmonday Games for making these amazing products. I don't know.
You can say art pieces.
They are art pieces. They're just, these narratives are important. I think they're beautiful and very powerful. And I think that the larger society's conversation around what video games are and what purpose they serve and this idea that they're a waste of time is wrong.
Never even consider stuff like this.
I know you don't, but you've been protected and come from a gamer family your whole life. The reason that some games rub you the wrong way is because they come from an idea like that. We'll talk about it at home. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope, if video games are new to you, I hope this wets your whistle for what's possible. Maybe we want a few fans for the podcast, even though if you're not a gamer, we're probably going to lose you because most of the time we're talking gamer stuff for gamers.
Yeah, but if you do like a narrative, we are going to be talking about Mutazone next week. And I love this narrative. It is a very gentle, nice way to unwind after talking about all this shit.
Yeah.
Well, having some heavy subject matter of its own, of course.
Yeah, but it's a lot more connected, and I am looking forward to talking about it.
Oh, yeah. So, join us next time where we discuss Mutazone, and think that one's coming out on our normal schedule, but we'll see.
Yeah, bear with us.
Oh, yeah. We're doing our best. We're human beings, too. And thank you so much for joining us. Please check out the blog, leave comments on the video. We love to hear from you, and yeah, a discussion is welcome. Feedback is welcome. We hope you have a lovely day. I am Giggleklutz.
I'm Honeyshuckleex.
I'm Sackbot Barbecue.
And this has been Collab Not Multiplayer. Goodbye.
Bye!